The readings are impossible!
It's healing itself.
This energy is unknown! The wound is closing!
Look at that human bleed. Whoa, God!
The chamber was larger than any city on Earth. Cold white light fell from a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Thousands of alien eyes watched from rising seats carved into black stone walls. Some had scales. Some had metal limbs. Some floated in silent gravity fields. At the center of the chamber stood one human. Commander Elias Ward did not move. He wore a simple dark uniform. No heavy armor. No visible weapons. His hands were empty at his sides. His face was calm, but his eyes were alert. He could feel the weight of every stare. Above him, a massive holographic display showed the scan of a human body. Thin bones compared to the stone-like skeletons of the Targans. Soft skin compared to the armored hides of the Kroth. Muscle density lower than most warrior species. Numbers glowed in cold blue light. Fragile. The word appeared on several alien screens. A tall silver figure stepped forward from the council platform. Ambassador Kethrael of the Valorians. His body was smooth and metallic like living chrome. His voice echoed through the chamber. Species 3921. Humans of Earth. He paused. Biological analysis confirms low durability. Low structural resistance. High internal vulnerability. The chamber remained silent. Then he said the word clearly. Fragile. It spread like a whisper through thousands of voices. Fragile. Breakable. Weak. Elias heard it. He did not react. This was the first evaluation. Every new spacefaring species faced it. The council believed strength decided survival. Power earned respect. Weakness invited control. Kethrael lifted one long metallic hand. To confirm our analysis, a physical demonstration is required. A heavy door on the far side of the chamber opened. Something stepped through. The Kroth warrior was massive. Over 7 feet tall. Skin dark red and thick like stone. 2 curved horns rose from his skull. His arms were longer than a human's, ending in claws sharp enough to cut steel. Each step shook the floor. The warrior stopped 10 meters from Elias. The translator drones hummed above them. Single strike, Kethrael announced. Non-lethal. Controlled force. Non-lethal. Elias almost smiled at that word. The Kroth warrior rolled his shoulders. Muscles moved like shifting rock under his skin. He studied Elias as one might study a fragile statue. Elias removed his jacket calmly and placed it on the floor. Gasps moved through alien seats. No armor. No shield. Nothing. He looked directly at the warrior. Do it, Elias said quietly. The Kroth did not hesitate. He moved faster than something his size should move. His fist came down like a falling meteor. The impact echoed like thunder. A sharp cracking sound filled the chamber. Elias's body lifted from the ground and slammed hard against the stone floor several meters away. Silence followed. A thin line of red spread across the pale stone. Elias did not move. The Kroth stepped back. Medical drones floated forward instantly, scanning. On the massive holographic screen, damage reports appeared. Left arm, multiple fractures. 3 ribs, broken. Internal bleeding detected. Severe trauma. Some alien spectators turned away. Others nodded calmly. Kethrael spoke again. The demonstration confirms. A sudden alarm cut him off. The medical drones froze mid-air. On the holographic screen, the damage reports began changing. Internal bleeding, stabilizing. Bone fragments, aligning. Cell activity, extreme spike. 1 rib shifted. Then another. A cracking sound echoed again, but this time it was different. Bones were moving back into place. The red line on the floor stopped growing. The broken arm twitched. Slowly, Elias's fingers curled. The chamber fell into complete silence. Alien scanners began flashing warnings. Uncontrolled cellular regeneration detected. Energy consumption rising. Pain receptors active. Elias's eyes opened. They were clear. Focused. He inhaled sharply and rolled onto his side. His arm bent at a strange angle for a moment, then straightened with a sickening snap. Several alien observers recoiled. The broken ribs pressed outward under his skin, shifting back into form. Within seconds, the bleeding stopped. Within a minute, he was on one knee. Within 2 minutes, he stood. The Kroth warrior took 1 step back. The human's uniform was torn. Blood stained the fabric. But he was standing. Fully. Elias rotated his shoulders slowly, tested his breathing. Pain burned through him like fire. His body felt heavy. His heart pounded like a war drum. But he did not fall. He looked at the Croth. Was that controlled? He asked calmly. No one laughed. The chamber was too quiet. Kethrael's metallic face showed no emotion, but his voice was no longer steady. Explain, he demanded toward the human delegation. A woman stepped forward from the Earth platform. Dr. Amara Singh. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Humans evolved on a high-risk world, she said simply. Earth is unstable. Disease, predators, natural disasters, internal conflict. She looked around the chamber. Our bodies developed emergency survival responses. The hologram shifted, showing human DNA strands lighting up in red. When trauma reaches critical levels, dormant genetic sequences activate. Rapid cell repair. Accelerated bone reconstruction. Temporary suppression of shock. The Croth warrior stared at Elias. You should not be standing, he growled. Elias wiped blood from his mouth. Yeah, he replied quietly. We hear that a lot. Murmurs spread through the chamber. One of the insect-like council members leaned forward. Energy cost? It clicked. Dr. Singh nodded. High. After extreme regeneration, exhaustion follows. The body pays a price. Kethrael's eyes narrowed. So they can be killed. Yes, she answered calmly. Humans die. Elias looked around at thousands of alien faces. We just don't break easy. Silence again. The Croth warrior slowly stepped closer to Elias. Not in aggression. In caution. He reached out and pressed one claw gently against the human's healed arm. Solid. No weakness. The warrior lowered his hand. In the upper seats, whispers changed tone. Not fragile. Adaptive. Dangerous. Kethrael raised his hand to restore order, but the chamber no longer felt the same. The single human at the center was no longer being measured. Now they were studying him. Recalculating. Reclassifying. Elias picked up his jacket from the floor. He put it back on despite the torn fabric and dried blood. He stood straight. Pain still burned in every nerve. But he did not show it. High above, the holographic display flickered. The word fragile slowly faded from the human file. It was replaced by a new note. Regenerative anomaly detected. As the session ended, many species left in silence. The Croth warrior remained for a moment longer, watching Elias. You feel pain? The warrior said quietly. Elias met his gaze. Every second. Why stand? The human gave a small, tired smile. Because that's what we do. The warrior nodded once. And across the chamber, the galaxy began to understand something terrifying. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were not the largest. But when they fell, they stood back up. And the council would never again use the word fragile so easily. Rocket. The chamber did not empty quickly that day. Aliens did not rush to leave. They stayed. They watched the human. Commander Elias Ward stood near the Earth delegation platform. His body looked normal again, but inside it felt like fire. Every breath reminded him of the damage he had just survived. His arm was healed. His ribs were whole. But exhaustion was crawling into his muscles. Across the chamber, emergency scientific teams surrounded the holographic display. Numbers were still updating. Cellular regeneration spike, confirmed. Genetic activation pattern, unknown origin. Energy drain, extreme. Ambassador Kethrael remained at the center platform. His metallic face reflected the blue light of the data screens. This was not declared in your species report, he said coldly. Dr. Amara Singh stepped forward calmly. It was not hidden, she replied. It was not fully understood. That was true. Even on Earth, human regeneration at this level was rare. It only activated under extreme trauma. It was not something people could control like flipping a switch. It was survival instinct, written deep in ancient DNA. One of the insect-like council members clicked sharply. You claim this developed naturally? Yes, Amara answered. Earth forced it. The hologram changed. Now it showed images of Earth. Violent storms tearing cities apart. Volcanoes erupting. Pandemics spreading through populations. War footage. History. Humans survived ice ages, she continued. Mass extinctions. Plagues that killed millions. World wars. Environmental collapse. Each time we adapted. She zoomed in on the DNA structure again. Hidden gene clusters activate during catastrophic injury. They increase cell division speed. Bone marrow output rises. Damaged tissue is replaced at accelerated rates. Murmurs filled the chamber. An aquatic species floated closer in its water sphere. This violates biological balance, it said. Rapid cell growth causes mutation. Amara nodded. Yes, cancer is a risk. Organ failure is a risk. Energy depletion can kill us. She did not hide the truth. Humans are not immortal. Elias stood quietly, listening. He felt the weight of thousands of calculations happening in alien minds. They were no longer asking if humans were weak. They were asking how dangerous humans could become. Suddenly, one of the upper screens flashed red. Unauthorized scan detected. Several small probe drones had moved toward Elias without permission. They circled him, scanning aggressively. Elias did not move. But Earth security officers stepped forward instantly. Deactivate your drones, one of them warned. The probes ignored the command. On the main display, Elias's biology appeared again, but this time deeper. Neural pathways lighting up. Adrenal response still active. Pain signals traveling through his spine. One alien scientist spoke loudly. Pain suppression level is abnormal. Another responded, no, pain tolerance is elevated, not suppressed. That detail changed everything. Humans were not numb. They felt it. All of it. The broken bones. The tearing muscle. The internal bleeding. And they kept functioning. Kethrail slowly turned toward Elias. Commander Ward, he said, voice echoing. Describe the sensation of your injury. The chamber quieted again. Elias thought for a moment. It felt like being hit by a truck, he said simply. Then like knives in my chest. Hard to breathe. Hard to think. And yet you stood. Yes. Why? Elias looked at the Croth warrior who was still present near the arena floor. Because falling down wasn't the end. There was no pride in his voice. Just fact. The unauthorized drones suddenly pushed closer, attempting microsample extraction. That was a mistake. Elias's body reacted before his mind did. His hand moved fast, faster than expected for a fragile species. He grabbed one drone midair and crushed it. Metal snapped. Sparks flew. Security alarms blared instantly. The remaining drones retreated. The chamber gasped. Energy levels on Elias's scan spiked again. Not regeneration this time. Adrenal response. Heightened reflex speed. Dr. Singh looked concerned. He needs rest, she said quietly. Post-regenerative crash will begin soon. Right on cue, Elias's legs trembled slightly. His vision blurred for half a second. The cost had arrived. Regeneration was not free. It drained glucose reserves. Burned through oxygen. Stressed the heart. A Croth medical officer studied the data. His body is stabilizing but approaching metabolic collapse. Amara nodded. Yes. Extreme healing requires extreme fuel. Kethrail processed this information carefully. So in prolonged combat, he said slowly, humans would eventually fail. Amara met his gaze. Yes. She paused. But not quickly. The words hung heavy in the air. The council members began whispering among themselves. Strategic discussions. Risk analysis. Threat potential. One smaller species spoke nervously. If injured repeatedly, does adaptation increase? Amara hesitated. We believe so. That answer made the chamber colder. Elias felt it too. He finally sat down on a nearby step. Quiet. Controlled. The Croth warrior approached again, slower this time. You felt every fracture, the warrior said quietly. Yes. And you did not scream. Elias shrugged slightly. Sometimes we do. The Croth studied him with something new in his expression. Respect. High above, the holographic classification file updated again. Previous label, low durability species. Status, under review. Then another line appeared. Adaptive trauma response, confirmed. Kethrail raised his hand once more to silence the room. Human delegation, he announced. Your species will undergo extended evaluation. Until review is complete, you are neither classified as weak nor strong. He looked down at Elias. You are unresolved. It was not an insult. It was uncertainty. And uncertainty frightened powerful empires. As Earth's delegation prepared to leave the chamber, a message was quietly transmitted across several hidden channels. Far beyond council space, in the territory of the Zyr Dominion, military analysts received the biological data from the evaluation. They studied the regeneration rates, the pain tolerance, the adaptive response. And one Zyr commander smiled. Interesting, he said softly. Let us test how fragile they truly are. Back in the chamber, Elias slowly stood again despite the exhaustion pulling at him. He walked beside Dr. Singh toward the exit tunnel. Behind them, thousands of alien eyes followed. They were no longer looking at a weak species. They were looking at a question. And soon, someone in the galaxy would try to find the answer the hard way. Rocket. The Zyr Dominion did not believe in fear. They believed in proof. Weeks after the council evaluation, a quiet human colony at the edge of mapped space received an unexpected signal. Colony Epsilon 9. Population, 12,000. Mostly engineers. Farmers. Families. It was not a military world. That was why the Zyr chose it. In deep orbit above the colony, space bent slightly. Then it tore open. 5 black warships slipped out of faster-than-light travel. Their hulls were sharp and angular, covered in dark armor. No lights. No warning signals. They did not announce themselves. They did not ask for surrender. They fired. The first blast struck the colony's defense satellite grid. Explosions lit the sky like artificial suns. Metal debris rained down in burning pieces. On the surface, warning sirens screamed. People ran. Emergency shields activated over major population zones, but they were not designed for full military assault. Inside the command center, Colonel Mara Ilian stared at the tactical display. Zyr signatures confirmed, an officer reported. 5 capital ships. Ground assault craft launching. Mara's jaw tightened. So the test begins, she said quietly. Dropships entered the atmosphere like falling meteors. Their hulls glowed red from friction. They crashed into open land outside the colony walls. The doors exploded outward. Zyr soldiers stepped into the smoke. They were tall, thin, and armored in dark exoskeleton suits. Their helmets had narrow red visors. Each carried pulse rifles designed to burn through most known materials. Their commander watched through orbital sensors. Engage, he ordered calmly. The first line of human defenders met them outside the colony shield. They wore combat armor, lighter than Zyr plating, flexible, built for movement. The first exchange of fire lit the battlefield in blue and red streaks. A human soldier was hit in the chest. He dropped instantly. The Zyr advanced without slowing. Another human fell. Then another. The Zyr commander observed the data feeds. Fragile, he muttered. Then something changed. The first fallen soldier moved. His fingers twitched. Internal suit sensors activated emergency medical systems. Adrenaline. Coagulants. Pain suppressants. But this was more than technology. Inside his body, something ancient woke up. Cells accelerated. Blood vessels sealed. Damaged tissue began rebuilding at unnatural speed. The soldier gasped sharply and rolled to his side just as another pulse round struck the ground where his head had been. He pushed himself up. His chest armor was burned through. Smoke rose from the wound beneath. But the bleeding had stopped. Across the field, more human soldiers were doing the same. Falling. Twitching. Standing. Zyr tactical screens began flashing warnings. Target vitality restored. Severe trauma, not fatal. Multiple units re-engaging. The Zyr commander leaned forward. That is not possible. One Zyr trooper shot a human at close range. The blast tore through the soldier's shoulder. The human screamed. It was not a quiet sound. It was raw pain. But instead of retreating, the soldier charged forward. He tackled the Zyr to the ground. Even as his own wounds smoked and sealed, he fought. The Zyr trooper hesitated. That hesitation cost him. The human defenders did not fight like creatures trying to avoid damage. They fought like creatures who accepted it. Each injury triggered something stronger. Reaction times increased. Movements became sharper. Desperation turned into focus. Inside the colony command center, Colonel Mara watched casualty reports stabilize in ways that made no sense. Medical status? She demanded. Severe injuries across all units, the medic officer replied. But recovery rates are rising. Faster than projections. Mara allowed herself one small breath. Push them back, she ordered. Outside the battlefield shifted. The Zyr had expected fear. They had expected collapse. Instead they faced soldiers who refused to stay down. One human sniper took a direct hit to the leg. Bone shattered inside the armor. He dragged himself behind cover, breathing hard. Through tears of pain he kept firing. Minutes later, internal repair had stabilized the fracture enough for him to kneel again. He returned to position. The Zyr commander began recalculating. Escalate force, he ordered. Orbital cannons charged. A beam of concentrated energy struck the battlefield. The explosion threw humans and Zyr alike into the air. Smoke covered everything. For a moment there was silence. The Zyr commander nodded. Now they fall. But inside the smoke, movement began again. Slow at first, then steady. Human silhouettes stood up through the dust. Armor cracked. Helmets broken. Bodies shaking. But standing. The colony shield generators roared back to full power. Human reinforcements arrived from underground bunkers. The Zyr ground units began to lose formation. One Zyr officer transmitted urgently to orbit. They are adapting mid-combat. Injury response speed increasing. The commander's voice hardened. Impossible. Yet the data did not lie. Each wave of trauma made the humans faster to recover. More aggressive. More relentless. The Zyr had studied the council recording. They believed regeneration had limits. They were correct. But they misunderstood one thing. Limits did not mean surrender. After 2 hours of brutal fighting, the Zyr ground forces were surrounded. Human soldiers, bloodied and exhausted, closed in from every side. Many could barely stand. Some leaned on each other. But their eyes were still focused. Still burning. The Zyr commander made a decision he had never made before. Retreat. Orbiting ships opened jump corridors. Surviving ground units were extracted under heavy fire. As the last Zyr ship vanished into faster-than-light space, silence finally returned to Colony Epsilon 9. The battlefield was covered in smoke and broken metal. Human medics moved quickly among the wounded. Many soldiers collapsed now that the danger had passed. Post-regeneration crash had begun. Bodies that refused to fall during battle now demanded payment. Colonel Mara walked through the field slowly. She saw soldiers lying on stretchers, alive, burnt, broken, exhausted, alive. A young private looked up at her weakly. "Did we win?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." He smiled faintly before losing consciousness from exhaustion. High above the planet, deep in Zyr territory, the commander reviewed the battle data again. Projected outcome, human collapse within 11 minutes. Actual outcome, Zyr withdrawal after 2 hours. He stared at the final note in the combat report. Human units exhibit extreme trauma adaptation. Psychological resilience high. Pain does not reduce combat efficiency. The commander slowly leaned back. "They are not fragile," he said quietly. "They are persistent." And persistence, he realized, was far more dangerous. Rocket. The galaxy was watching now. The battle at Colony Epsilon 9 was no longer a rumor. It was recorded, studied, shared across military networks. Again and again alien commanders replayed the same moment. A human falls. A human bleeds. A human stands. But something else disturbed them more. The humans did not fight like creatures trying to avoid pain. They fought like creatures who understood it. On Earth, inside a secure research facility, Dr. Amara Singh stood before a wall of holographic battle footage. Commander Elias Ward stood beside her, his arms folded. The screen showed slowed images of injured human soldiers during the Zyr attack. Heart rate spikes. Adrenaline floods. Neural activity surging like lightning. Amara zoomed in on a brain scan. "When trauma hits," she explained, "the human brain activates multiple survival systems at once." Elias watched silently. "Pain does not shut them down," she continued. "It sharpens them." On the screen, one soldier took a blast to the side. For half a second, his movements slowed. Then his neural signals doubled in speed. Reaction time improved by 12%. Muscle output increased. Focus narrowed. "He became more dangerous after being injured," Elias said quietly. Amara nodded. "Yes." Far away in Zyr Dominion space, their High War Council reviewed the same data. The Zyr commander who led the failed attack stood before them. "You underestimated them," one council member hissed. "They are biologically unstable," the commander replied calmly. "Pain increases performance." That statement made the room go silent. Most species in the galaxy evolved to avoid damage at all cost. Pain was a warning. Pain meant retreat. Pain meant survival through avoidance. Humans were different. Pain meant fight harder. Weeks later, another incident proved it. A joint military training exercise was arranged between humans and a neutral alien species called the Ralthari. The Ralthari were fast, tall, and covered in natural bioarmor. They believed humans had survived only because the Zyr made tactical mistakes. They wanted proof. The exercise was controlled. Non-lethal energy rounds only. 2 squads. 10 Ralthari. 10 humans. Commander Elias observed from a control platform. The simulation began. The Ralthari moved with perfect formation. Fast, silent, efficient. Within minutes, 3 human soldiers were hit and dropped to the ground. The Ralthari commander smiled. Fragile, he whispered. Then the unexpected happened. One of the fallen humans rolled behind cover. His armor showed heavy impact damage. His breathing was fast. His voice shook slightly over comms. Still in it, he said. Another human, hit in the leg, dragged himself to a higher position instead of retreating. Pain sensors in their suits were active. They felt everything. But their coordination improved. Human squad communication became sharper. Short, clear, focused. Left flank, 3 targets. Suppressing fire. Push now. The Ralthari noticed the shift too late. The injured humans were predicting movements faster. Taking risks the uninjured would not. One human allowed himself to be hit again to create an opening for his teammate. The tactic worked. Within 15 minutes, the Ralthari squad was surrounded. Simulation ended. Result, human victory. The Ralthari commander approached Elias afterward. You sacrificed your own safety, he said. Elias nodded. Yes. That is irrational. Elias looked at the training field where medics helped exhausted soldiers to their feet. Maybe, he replied. But it works. Later, alien scientists requested permission to study human pain response more deeply. Earth allowed limited observation. Inside a controlled medical lab, a volunteer human soldier agreed to demonstrate. His name was Private Lucas Hale. He lay calmly on a medical platform. A controlled energy pulse was applied to his arm, strong enough to cause significant pain but not permanent damage. Lucas's body reacted instantly. Heart rate up. Breathing sharp. Sweat forming. But his eyes stayed open. Brain activity spiked on the monitors. Motor cortex lit up. Focus centers activated. The alien observers were unsettled. He is fully aware, one whispered. Yes, Dr. Amara replied. Why does he not shut down? Because shutting down is a luxury, she said softly. Our world did not allow it. Another pulse. Stronger. Lucas's jaw tightened. A quiet sound escaped him, not fear. Endurance. The damage began healing within seconds. Muscle fibers knitting back together. The alien observers stepped back slightly. One finally asked the question none had wanted to say. If humans improve under trauma, what happens in prolonged war? Amara looked at the screen. What happens, she said carefully, is that we learn. The phrase spread across military channels. Humans learn. Zyr analysts studied long-term projections. If humans faced repeated conflict, their soldiers would adapt faster with every battle. Tactics would evolve. Pain thresholds would rise. Recovery speed might increase. The more pressure applied, the harder they would become. For the first time, the Zyr Dominion considered something unthinkable. Avoiding direct conflict. Back on Earth, Elias stood alone on a balcony overlooking the ocean. His body still carried scars from the Council strike. He touched one lightly. Pain was still there. It always would be. But pain was not weakness. It was proof of survival. His communicator activated. Commander, a voice reported. Multiple alien empires are adjusting threat classifications. Humans are being labeled as high-risk combatants. Elias gave a small smile. Not proud. Not excited. Just aware. They called us fragile, he said quietly. The voice on the other end replied, they won't again. Far across the stars, military doctrines were being rewritten. New training manuals added one warning line. When engaging humans, do not rely on injury to end the fight. Because for humans, pain was not the end. It was the beginning. Rocket. Not every species in the galaxy respected limits. Some believed knowledge was more important than law. One of them was Dr. Virex Toll of the Zyr Dominion. He was not a soldier. He was a scientist. Cold. Patient. Curious. After the failed invasion of Colony Epsilon 9, Zyr High Command ordered deeper research into human biology. They needed answers. And Virex volunteered. Weeks later, a small human transport ship disappeared near neutral space. No distress call reached Earth. No wreckage was found. Only silence. Inside a hidden Zyr research station drifting in dark space, a human sat in a containment chamber. Sergeant Daniel Reyes. Hands restrained by energy cuffs. Armor removed. Body bruised but alive. Bright white lights filled the room. Transparent walls surrounded him. Behind them, alien figures moved and watched. Dr. Virex stepped closer to the glass. Subject appears stable, one assistant reported. Daniel slowly lifted his head. His face was swollen from earlier blows. One eye half closed. But he was conscious. Virex activated the translator field. Human, he said calmly. You will assist our understanding. Daniel gave a weak smile. Doesn't feel like I volunteered. Virex ignored the comment. Your species displays abnormal trauma recovery. We will measure limits. The first test began. A controlled energy blade cut across Daniel's forearm. Blood flowed instantly. Pain hit like fire. Daniel gritted his teeth. Breathing hard. Heart rate rising on the monitor. Alien observers leaned closer. The wound was severe. Muscle exposed. Then, cell activity spiked. The bleeding slowed. Flesh began pulling itself together. Not instantly, but steadily. Within 2 minutes, the cut was sealed. Scar forming. Virex recorded everything. Energy drain high, an assistant noted. Glucose levels falling. Daniel's body trembled slightly. Regeneration demanded fuel. But his eyes remained focused. Second test. A pulse blast to the chest. Daniel screamed this time. The sound echoed through the lab. Ribs cracked. He collapsed to one knee. Monitors flashed red warnings. Internal bleeding detected. But again, the ancient response activated. Blood vessels tightened. Bone marrow accelerated production. Fragments shifted back into place. The bleeding stopped. 15 minutes later, he was breathing normally again. Virex felt something unfamiliar. Excitement. Increase intensity, he ordered. The third test pushed further. Repeated trauma. Short recovery periods. Damage. Damage again. Each time the healing triggered faster. Daniel's body was adapting under pressure. Neural responses sharpened. Muscle reaction time improved even while restrained. Assistants began whispering. Regeneration speed increased by 9%. Pain tolerance rising. Stress hormones stabilizing instead of spiking. Virex stared at the data. This is not simple recovery, he said quietly. This is evolution in motion. Hours passed. Daniel's breathing grew heavier. Sweat covered his face. His body was reaching metabolic limits. But something else was happening. His eyes were changing. Not physically, mentally. They were not afraid anymore. They were calculating. Virex did not notice at first. He prepared the next test. Neural shock to simulate battlefield overload. Energy surged into the chamber. Daniel's body convulsed violently. For a moment, even the monitors struggled to read his vitals. Then everything stabilized again. But this time, faster than before. The assistant stepped back. Doctor, neural processing speed has increased beyond baseline. Daniel slowly lifted his head. Energy cuffs flickered slightly. The repeated trauma had pushed his nervous system into extreme efficiency. His muscles tightened. Energy output rising. Regeneration had consumed enormous fuel, but the station's atmosphere was oxygen-rich. His body used it. Adapted. Virex finally noticed the change in Daniel's stare. You are approaching collapse, Virex said calmly. Daniel's lips curled slightly. You first. With sudden force, Daniel pulled against the energy cuffs. They were designed for normal biological limits. Not for a body that had just adapted through extreme trauma cycles. The cuffs sparked. Cracked. Shattered. Alarms exploded across the station. Security fields activated. Daniel fell to one knee from exhaustion, but forced himself up again. Every nerve in his body screamed. Every muscle burned. But he moved. A security drone entered the chamber. Daniel grabbed it midair and slammed it into the containment wall. Sparks flew. Guards rushed in. Daniel moved faster than before. Pain sharpened him. Every injury from the tests had refined his responses. He fought like someone who had nothing left to lose. The lab became chaos. Virex stumbled backward as consoles exploded. One assistant tried to seal the chamber, too late. Daniel stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, body shaking from energy loss. He looked at Virex through smoke and broken glass. You wanted to know our limits, Daniel said between breaths. He took one step forward. The alien scientist froze. Daniel's voice was low now. We don't find them until you push us. Security forces finally overwhelmed him with full-power stun fields. Daniel collapsed. Unconscious. But alive. The lab was destroyed. Half the research data corrupted. 3 scientists injured. Virex stood in silence, staring at the destruction. His assistants waited for orders. Instead, Virex slowly deactivated the remaining experiments. "End this," he said quietly. "Why, doctor?" one assistant asked. Virex looked at the final biological readings. Each trauma had made the human stronger, faster, more dangerous. "We were not studying weakness," Virex replied. "We were sharpening a weapon." Far away in human space, Earth Command detected a faint emergency signal finally escaping the damaged Zyr station. It carried only a few broken words before cutting out. "Alive, adapting." Commander Elias Ward received the report. His jaw tightened. "They're experimenting on us," one officer said. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes." He looked toward the stars. "They're about to learn something else." In the darkness of space, the Zyr Dominion began to understand a terrifying truth. Hurting humans did not break them. It prepared them. Rocket. The warning did not come from human space. It came from the outer dark. A mining world in Valorian territory stopped transmitting. Then another. Then 3 more. No distress calls. No survivors. Only silence. When scout ships finally reached the system, they found planets stripped bare. Cities gone. Oceans poisoned. Orbiting stations crushed like broken toys. There were no invasion fleets. No negotiations. No demands. Only one message left in drifting debris. Organic mass absorbed. The galaxy named it the Virex Swarm. It was not a single species. It was billions. Living ships made of hardened flesh and bone-like material. They did not use lasers. They did not use missiles. They consumed. Boarded ships. Tore through hulls. Overwhelmed defenders with endless bodies. The Valorians fought first. Their armored soldiers were strong. But once injured, they weakened. Once infected, they fell. Entire fleets were swallowed from the inside. Emergency signals flooded the Galactic Council. Species that once called humans fragile were now afraid. The council chamber filled again. This time no one whispered. No one mocked. Ambassador Kethrail spoke with visible tension. The swarm advances toward core systems. Casualties exceed projections. Standard defensive doctrines are failing. A hologram showed a Virex boarding event. Valorian soldiers firing desperately. Once wounded, their movements slowed. Pain shut them down. The swarm did not stop. It never stopped. Kethrail turned toward the human delegation. "Earth," he said carefully, "what is your strategic assessment?" Commander Elias Ward stood calmly. His voice was steady. "They win through pressure," he said. "They rely on fear. Injury. Overwhelm." He looked at the hologram again. "Then don't let injury end the fight." Silence filled the chamber. Several species exchanged uncertain looks. One council member spoke softly. "You are suggesting close combat against a species that consumes living matter." "Yes," Elias replied. "That is suicide." Elias shook his head slightly. "No. It's endurance." Within days, human fleets moved. They did not form distant artillery lines like other empires. They approached directly. Human warships were smaller than Valorian cruisers. Less armored than Zyr battle carriers. But built for something else. Boarding. The first major engagement took place above a dying Ralthari colony. The sky was filled with living Virex vessels. Massive organic shapes pulsing in dark space. Human ships jumped in without hesitation. Missile volleys cleared entry paths. Then came the dangerous part. Boarding tubes launched. Human soldiers entered the enemy ships. Inside it was nightmare. Walls moved. Flesh pulsed. The air was thick and toxic. Virex organisms attacked in waves. Claws, teeth, acidic fluids. The first human squad took heavy damage within seconds. Armor burned. Skin torn. Blood floated in zero gravity. But they kept moving. A soldier lost part of his shoulder to acid spray. He screamed. The sound echoed in the organic corridor. His squad leader grabbed him. "You good?" The soldier nodded through clenched teeth. "Still here." His wound was already sealing. Not fully healed. But functional. They advanced deeper. The Virex expected retreat when injury began. Instead, the humans pushed harder. Every time the swarm inflicted damage, the response came faster. Reflexes sharpened. Coordination tightened. Pain became focus. On command channels, human medics gave constant updates. Regeneration active. Energy levels dropping. Rotate front line. They understood their limits. Short intense pushes. Quick withdrawals for recovery. Then back in. Other species watched from orbit in disbelief. Ralthari commanders observed human units fighting inside enemy structures where no other soldiers could survive. In one brutal encounter, a Virex creature impaled a human captain through the abdomen. The alien observers gasped. But the captain, face pale and sweating, activated his last explosive charge while still conscious. He destroyed the core growth node of that ship. He died. But the rest of his squad survived. His sacrifice triggered a chain collapse inside the organic vessel. When the human fleet withdrew hours later, half the swarm ships were drifting lifeless. For the first time, the Virex retreated. The news spread fast. The fragile species had done what armored empires could not. They endured inside the storm. At the next council emergency session, the tone had changed completely. Ambassador Kethrael stood slowly. Human intervention reduced swarm advance by 40%. No pride in his voice. Only fact. Elias stood again in the center of the chamber. Scars visible on his hands now. Your soldiers suffer heavy casualties, one council member said carefully. Yes, Elias replied. You continue anyway. Yes. Why? Elias looked around the chamber at species who once measured bone density and muscle mass. Because someone has to stand in front, he said simply. Silence followed. Not cold silence. Respectful silence. Across battlefields, human soldiers collapsed after combat from extreme exhaustion. Regeneration crash hit hard. Medics worked non-stop. Many would carry scars forever. They were not immortal. They were not invincible. But they were persistent. And against an enemy that relied on breaking morale through pain. That persistence was deadly. Deep within swarm territory, the Virex hive mind processed new combat data. Target species 3921. Injury does not neutralize. Fear response minimal. Adaptation rapid. The hive adjusted strategy. Avoid prolonged engagement. That single directive echoed across living ships. In the darkness of space, a horrifying realization spread through the galaxy. The predators had found prey that refused to stay broken. And now, the swarm was learning caution. Rocket. The war against the Virex swarm lasted 11 months. 11 months of fire. 11 months of boarding actions inside living ships. 11 months of pain. When it finally ended, it did not end with a massive explosion. It ended with silence. The last swarm vessel drifted lifeless near the edge of known space. Its organic surface dark and still. No movement. No signal. No hunger. The galaxy had survived. But it had changed. The Galactic Council chamber filled once again. Not for evaluation. Not for judgment. For acknowledgement. The seats were not full this time. Many species were still rebuilding. Some had lost entire worlds. Ambassador Kethrael stood at the center platform. His metallic form carried visible damage marks from earlier battles. He had not hidden during the war. None of them had. At the center of the chamber stood Commander Elias Ward. Older now. More scars visible on his face and hands. His posture was straight, but there was tiredness in his eyes. Behind him stood representatives of Earth. Doctors. Soldiers. Engineers. Ordinary humans who had faced something beyond nightmares. Kethrael raised his hand. Species 3921, he began. His voice echoed softly across the chamber. Humans of Earth. There was no cold tone now. No empire in this chamber will deny the truth. When the swarm advanced, many of us failed. Images appeared above them. Valorian cities falling. Zyr fleets overwhelmed. Ralthari colonies abandoned. Then the images changed. Human ships launching into impossible odds. Human soldiers fighting inside organic corridors. Humans standing back up through blood and fire. Kethrael continued. You endured where others could not. You advanced when retreat seemed logical. You accepted injury without surrender. He paused. A long pause. Once we called you fragile. The chamber grew very still. Elias did not move. That word will not be used again. A new classification file appeared on the main hologram. Species 3921 human. Status, core defensive ally. Primary trait, extreme adaptive resilience. Combat advisory, do not measure durability by appearance. Soft murmurs spread through the chamber. Respect. One younger alien delegate raised a trembling hand. Commander Ward, the delegate asked carefully, are humans without fear? Elias finally spoke. His voice was calm. No. The chamber listened closely. We feel fear, he continued. We feel pain. We lose people. We break bones. We bleed. He looked at his scarred hand for a moment. We just don't stop. Silence followed again. But this time it was not judgment. It was understanding. Later, outside the chamber, Elias stood alone near the observation window. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Dr. Amara Singh joined him quietly. You could have asked for more, she said. More power. More authority in the council. Elias shook his head slightly. We didn't fight for control. He watched a distant human fleet preparing to jump to a rebuilding world. We fought because it needed to be done. Amara studied him for a moment. They'll never underestimate us again. Elias gave a small, tired smile. Good. Across the galaxy, training academies updated their tactical manuals. New soldiers of many species learned a simple lesson. Do not assume weakness from appearance. Do not rely on pain to end a human. Do not expect them to fall and stay down. Even the Zyr Dominion changed its doctrine. Dr. Virex Toll, who once tried to measure human limits, now lectured young scientists. Humans do not become dangerous because they are unbreakable, he explained to his students. They become dangerous because they refuse to remain broken. Months later, on a quiet human colony world, a memorial was built. Names carved into black stone. Soldiers who did not return from swarm vessels. Civilians who stood their ground. Families gathered silently. A young child touched one of the carved names and looked up at her mother. Were they strong? She asked. Her mother knelt beside her. Yes, she said softly. Stronger than the monsters? The mother smiled gently. They were stronger than giving up. Above the memorial, the sky was clear. Peaceful. For now. Far beyond known space, new dangers would always exist. The universe was not gentle. But the galaxy had learned something important. Strength was not only armor. It was not only weapons. Sometimes, strength was standing up again. Back in the council archives, the original evaluation file remained stored. The word fragile was still there in old data, but it was marked obsolete. Never again used in official description. Because when the galaxy had faced extinction, it was the so-called fragile species that stepped forward first. And when they fell, they rose. Again. And again. And again. Rocket.